talk about marriage and family, especially in relationship to retirement. So I'm going to hand the torch on over to her. Lori, thank you so much for being willing to join us today.
You're welcome. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Lori Barron, been married for a long time to my husband. He just retired a couple years ago from Evansville Police Department in Evansville, Indiana. He was able to retire a little early. And so, but I'm actually a nurse by trade. And I put this first slide on here because whether it's the family or the officer, we're not just an officer or an officer's wife or a fireman or a fireman's wife. You know, I'm a nurse, I'm an aunt, I'm a dog mom, you know, I'm several things. And so I think that that needs to be brought out just so that whether in retirement or out of retirement, you know, we know we're just not our jobs. So through Dave, he's had multiple critical incidents in his 27 years. And so I've experienced those too. And that's really what we're wanting to bring out, is that it doesn't just affect the officer, it affects the family. So I'm actually going to talk about a little bit about his officer-involved shooting. Although he's been involved in a lot of different critical incidents, his officer-involved shooting really didn't affect him as much as it did me. The tornado we had here, he said, affected him more than that. So if your spouse had a critical incident, doesn't mean you're going to experience them the same, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you the same, or maybe it doesn't really even affect you at all. So he was involved in a shooting in 2003, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But probably in about 2005, he developed our peer support team on our department. And then in about 2007, myself and Emily Sandulo, another police officer's wife, developed our family support team. So I'm talking about something that happened in 2003, which is a long time, but it still has some effects today. So through developing these teams, you know, we've done multiple presentations to our police academy. Our department has a police academy for new recruits and in the surrounding areas. So one night we dedicated to the families, and three of us talked about our experiences with our spouses. And the ones of us that started it had no peer support team or family support team when we started. So we knew what we didn't like about it to help, you know, make the experience better. We've presented to our Evansville Fire Department, helped them develop their peer support team. Their family support team is not as well developed as ours yet, but they're working on it. And we've talked to a lot of other departments, even if we haven't done formal presentations. We've talked to people really all over the states, just kind of wanting to know how it started. So, you know, we've had training, whether it's on peer support, first responder resiliency, critical incident stress management, suicide prevention, all those things. So whether you have a team in retirement or before retirement, everybody that's on that team really needs to have some credentials. They need, you know, obviously had experience, what they've experienced in the real world, but to give value or worth to other people that you know somewhat what you're talking about. So I love this picture. Just, I'm partial, but that's my opinion. I think police wives are the strength behind the badge and their families. And I know there's a bad rap about divorce and everything on the department, and you know, a lot of, you know, jobs there is, but I think that it's important to know that, I know we're talking about retirement now, so I'm kind of talking a little bit about both, but if you didn't have a good relationship or didn't have things right, and you know, our marriage isn't perfect by any means. He's sitting right here by me, so I can say that. You know, we struggled with a lot of things too, and still to this day, but I think that the wives are an important part that are missed in the police world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the function of family support, during and their career and in retirement. So the officer involved shooting that I'm going to talk to you about happened on July 4th, 2003. So this month in 2003. So I still think about it every July 4th. So it's not a fun holiday for me. I don't really like it too well. And one thing that Lisa had said, and it's really important, and hopefully Lisa or anybody that wants to give their 2 cents worth tonight, please share anything or ask any questions, but we experience secondary trauma by what they went through. So he went into work on 3rd shift, July 4th, so that's really what I think of it as, but technically he says it happened on July 5th. So I received a call at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he told me he had just shot someone. So, you get woken up, and, I don't even remember. That's really the only thing I remember asking him. The only thing I remember asking him is if the person had died. I don't really remember asking him if he was okay, any of those things. Years later, he said that I did ask him that. So, I receive a call. I want to know if I could come to the police station. He said he has no idea. He's got to go. So, I'm a nurse. I'm pretty, an extrovert. I'm going to go down there. Of course, the police station's closed at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I had to call around a lot of different people to see if I could even come in. And so finally, a police officer that was friends with Dave told me he'd meet me at headquarters. So, all these things are things that no one should ever have to do. Why should I have to think of all these things to come down there? They didn't, and, we didn't really have a lot of officer involved shooting in 2003, and that's changed since 2003. I think their department here is about 300 people. So, I go down there. They sit me in a room by myself. They did let us have time to talk, so that was good. Make sure he's okay. And then he went through about a 6 or 7 hour process of everything you have to do if you've been involved in a critical incident. And so they did let me go through that with him, but, I'm thinking, who am I going to call? Who am I going to call and to talk to someone that my husband has just shot and killed somebody? Because, that's not a normal thing in the real world if you're not in law enforcement. So the person that Dave had to shoot had just killed the 3-year-old mother of his child. So, and this was in 2003. So, I'm not really here to talk about his officer involved shooting per se. It can have lasting effects from 2003. So I was a manager of cardiac rehab for about 20 years, and the grandmother of the person that Dave had to kill was in my cardiac rehab program. So my staff knew about it. So, I can still remember when they came in and told me, I think this is a relative of his. And then I was, anxious, don't tell him my last name, don't, do all this. So, that was something that I had to go through with at my work. And then the child was 3 years old at the time. So she had just lost her mother because this criminal had just killed her, and then Dave had to kill him. So you have a 3-year-old now that has no parents. So fast forward to about 4 years ago, now she's about 16, she's in high school, and she tries to contact my husband, and she wants to meet him because both of her parents are dead. And she's read every article, everything, but he is the only one that really knows really what happened. He was there. So after several attempts, Dave was going to meet with her with the permission of the department in a certain area, with somebody, all those things. But then it just never happened because she had to have the permission of both of her grandparents to do it because that's who she was living with, and she only had the permission of one. So then she gave up on that and said she would contact him again when she got out of high school, which she did, and she wanted to meet him. So he was still on the police department at this time, and he was going to meet her. She was going to get back with him, and then she never did. So now Dave is retired. So now he's not going to meet with her ever since he's not on the department. Because one of the fears for me is, okay, if she shoots and kills him while he's on the department, then that's a line of duty death. But now that he's off the department, that isn't a line of duty death, I don't think. But anyway, so she has tried to contact me twice on Facebook. And I've never answered her, but she knows who I am. So fast forward to 2020, she's still trying to reach out to me. So, and several years ago when Dave and I did presentations, we showed his autopsy picture because of his belly, because it had a big tattoo that said destiny. And we always said, that was his destiny. And that's kind of how we got through it, that he's not really a nice person. But when she contacted us, the child, we realized that's the name of his daughter. So that put a whole different slant on that also. So I just kind of want you to know how things can still be happening. And Dave's shoot was a good shoot. It was a good shoot. It was ruled a good shoot. We didn't get sued, all those things. So it went right as it could, but it still affected us. So I want to give you a little, this is kind of really a true story, how a lot of officers or males are and how females are, generic wise. So I get a call from Dave. I just shot someone, I'm okay. He said, that should have been good enough information. He said what it was, and he gave me the information. Now this is talking about it a lot later, but of course, this is me thinking, oh my God, what did you say? Are you hurt? Are you bleeding? Is the guy dead? Can I come see you? Who am I going to tell? I got to tell our family. Is it going to be on the news? Is it going to happen again? And, I think I'm going to be sick. So I just want you to know that oftentimes we think about all kinds of things at the same time, differently than the officer. So I think this was interesting, Sam, because of course I had no idea what you were talking about last week, and you gave something similar to this, that what I had experienced myself, and you kind of put it in perspective too. But at the beginning of the career, we're so proud. They've been trying for so long to get on the department. It's what they've always wanted. I thought I was going to be part of a special team with a lot of support from other officers' wives. We were just going to be one happy family. I couldn't wait to hear about his day. What did you do today? Tell me all about it, because I want to know it all. And I wanted to tell others that my husband was a police officer. So that was the beginning of his career. So somewhere in his career of the 27 years, I was still proud of what he did, but, I was more anxious. I thought about all the people. Most of Dave's career was on the street, but the last 6 or 8 years he was in the Joint Drug Task Force, which was a whole nother issue. But so I was anxious, about the criminals that he's arrested. Are they going to come to our house? Are they going to know where we live? We live out in the country. We live in the county. We don't live in the city, which is the department he was on. I don't know if, I've asked a couple of my friends and they said they've never had these thoughts, but you think of, okay, when I'm by myself, because most of his career I was by myself because he worked night shift. And every other shift in between, is that where am I going to be in the house when somebody's going to try to come in the house? Am I going to be upstairs? Am I going to be in my bedroom? Am I going to be sleeping? Are my dogs going to hear it? So the neighbors would always laugh at me They knew Dave when he was out of town because every light was on outside. So it was like Fort Knox. They knew Dave wasn't home because, you know, I said, I want to see him if they're coming in. I was a little more fearful. You know, I was naive. I was, you know, this nurse that had this perfect world, you know, kind of an example of at Christmas time, you know, they always love you and they bring you treats and cookies. And Dave said, if someone brought me cookies, I wouldn't be eating them anyway. So, you know, your whole mindset changes of this world you knew before. You know, I would get frustrated because you ask them how their day went, and he said, fine. Okay, I said, you worked for 8 hours and did nothing? So I want a job like that. So, you know, he wouldn't tell me about his day. You know, we didn't do anything exciting. Well, you know, you just want to hear about their day. So now fast forward all these years, you can understand why sometimes they didn't tell you about their day, but because they didn't want to discuss it with you, but you know, you feel like your relationship isn't good if they're not talking to you or feeling comfortable talking to you. So then you get angry. So in retirement, you know, I've been on the family support team since 2007 when we developed it. And so I actually got off the beginning of this year on our team, but my husband's still on it. So in retirement, you know, whether it's the spouse or the officer, you know, we talked about this earlier in all the presentations, is that you can have a loss of identity. If that's all you did and that's the only thing you loved, because and, you know, I think that, you know, I was an officer's wife for all those years and I was proud of that. So I'm a retired officer's wife now, but it's a little different. So you lose both your spouse and the officer, you lose a little bit of your identity. And then, you know, you still can be anxious because those criminals that he dealt with all those years, it's easier than ever to find nowadays. You know, you could do a lot of things to try to stop them from getting your address, but nowadays pretty much anybody can find anybody. So, you know, you're still anxious, you still worry. And then, you know, we also take on the ongoing stress of the spouse if they're not dealing with retirement so well. And you feel guilty about other officers that are still working in their families. And I can tell you, when your spouse has been involved in a critical incident of some type, any other officer that's involved in that critical incident, whether it is in your department, you know, out in Texas, in Florida, in Colorado, you still think about those officers. You still think about those families and what they're going through. And I just had a talk with an officer's wife in our department a couple days ago. She wanted to, you know, talk to me, and I had shared something on Facebook. You know, a lot of us are on police Facebook pages of some kind, police wife, National Police Wife Association. You know, when officers die, when they commit suicide, we see those. And so I share some of that. And she had seen where I'd shared that an officer in another department had, you know, killed himself. And she wanted to know if she didn't want to put this on our family support team page because she didn't want them to think it was her officer was having a problem, which he isn't. But it made her think, if an officer kills himself while he's on the department, will they still have benefits? So that was a question that had come up, especially with the climate we have today, with how they're hating police officers a lot of places, and you know, people are getting off the departments early and those things. So, you know, it just put up a red flag how important it is that you have ongoing conversations and support with the family. So I mentioned earlier that, you know, our husbands, and I mentioned husband just because I'm married, but I'm talking about whether it's a sister, a brother, your children, your mother, your father, a good friend, all that is your family. That, it's important to realize it's just a part of us. Like my husband, he's a police officer, but he's also a hunter, he's an uncle, he's a dog lover, he's a writer, all those kind of things. So we just have to realize we need to find something else now that brings us joy also. If that part of his career brought us joy, what are other things we like to do? And we still need to have open communication. So really everything that has been talked about these first 3 sessions, as a wife, I can relate to all of those things. And who do we trust to talk to? Whether it's a personal counselor or somebody on your peer or family support team, your girlfriend, your mom, whoever that is, and find ways for stress relief. Because most of us, when we worked full-time plus, you didn't have time, or you didn't make time to exercise. You didn't make time to do all those things. So we still need to find ways to for stress relief. And what I have found is with both of our careers, we were gone so much apart. Sometimes it's hard, some days and some minutes, to be in the same house with them more often now. I don't know if any of you experienced that, but we have. And so, we need to help others. And I think this is what you all are doing. We all are doing. We have a desire to help others, whether it's in their career or now that we've moved on to retirement, what can we do now to help others? And that we're not alone. And I think this is a good example of showing how you're not alone, because we all have the same thoughts and a lot of us have the same desires and goals. So this was part of our logo on our team. We took I always call it the badge, but it's the patch. Took their patch, and then of course I was a cardiac nurse. So I love hearts, but we kind of meshed that together, that the peer support team and the family support team go hand in hand. And I know a lot of departments and a lot of people talk about peer support, and they mean peer support, whether it's for family or whoever. That's just not kind of how our department did it. We tag teamed off of the peer support team, but it goes hand in hand. So I really wanted this talk to be interactive and thoughts. And I know I've really just talked to Lisa and Todd per se, so I don't know what others of you on here think about all this. But so if we're talking about retirement, how is it going to work? Well, there's things that worked when we set up the team while they're working that aren't probably going to work, but you'll have to modify it somehow. You still need to work closely with the peer support team, because that's the officers, and then whether you call it all the peer support team, it's all one bucket, or it's separate. Choose members that can be trusted. I know one thing that Todd had shared is that, here in Indiana, we have a law that's passed that it's the peer support team was called out. It was confidential, not like a counselor. So in our state, you couldn't go to court and say what you talked about. But of course, if that officer said they were going to kill somebody, or they killed somebody, or they were going to harm themselves, then that's a whole different thing. But a lot of the officers on the department kind of had warmed up to the peer support team, some, not all of them. But you had to choose members that are trusted, because one time, any of the members on your team, whether it be the peer or the family support, shared information that was private, your team is done. That person is done off the team, but then you have to have someone that's trusted. And like I talked about earlier, you have to have training. So what, Kathy and Shahidra are doing with their organization on critical incident stress management, post-traumatic stress syndrome, suicide prevention, all those things. With myself being a nurse at the hospital, anytime we had anything at the hospital that they gave that was free, like a lot of us have maybe things that we know our mental health society or a hospital that has some kind of free training, we would pass it on to the team. So, if they wanted to go to it. You can think locally, regionally, or nationally. I think right now, some of us in our mind are thinking, oh my gosh, we need to reach everybody. If this is what's going on in the world now is like, there's so many people that need to be helped. But we may need to just make it in a smaller setting. I know Todd had shared that, with the feds, and I think Sam had kind of alluded to this too, is they're more spread out than a police department. So, it's starting with this small group and then having contacts from each other that's going to build upon this. Now, getting the contact information, I'm still quite not sure how this exactly is going to work. What we did with the family support team, and you can't do it this way now that you guys are retired, is I wanted to reach out to the emergency contact of that police officer. So what we did, with the blessing of our police chief at the time, where it was started, is Emily and I wrote a letter about our experiences and that we wanted to start a family support team, and we wanted to know what their thoughts were, their worries were, and to have a meeting. So what we did is we sent it to that emergency contact. We addressed it to them through the police department. We got all that information through the police department, though, with their blessing. Because I don't know about Lisa, but most of the wives have told us that a lot of times their spouses would get information and they'd never pass it on to the spouse. So we didn't want to send it to that officer. We wanted to send it to the emergency contact. So that's how we got some of our contact information out. But, right this minute, I can't really think, and maybe you guys have some ideas of how to get this, contact information out to people. It's probably not going to be their personal address unless you can still get that through your department. I'm not sure. And then set up a meeting. And one of the things that we do is we have a private family support team page that only certain people can be let into. The only thing is, Facebook page is only as private as every single member in there, because I can tell you it's not all private, because other people, have said something on there and then someone told somebody and then it got back to somebody on the department. So the private Facebook page to me is possible, a good idea. And then we also have a GroupMe app, like of the people that, an app on your phone that if Todd and other people are a part of a peer support team, that your members are on an app on your phone called GroupMe. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. And then instead of sending an email out, because, we all look at our emails at different time, that if you get this GroupMe thing, that they have somebody that maybe needs to be checked on. So those are some things that I thought about. So,
Lori, we do ours through WhatsApp.
Okay.
And WhatsApp, it's much more encrypted. It's much more difficult for people to get in. It can be breached, but it's rare. It's pretty hard to do. And so I've got like 10 WhatsApps for different organizations that I work with. And It really works well because everything's in real time. You just post it, everybody sees it, people respond to the thread, and it gets the information disseminated really quick.
Right.
It needs to go
That's
out.
good.
Yeah.
But it's like, so what I want everybody to know is I really kind of want to open up for discussion. And I think Lisa has a lot to offer too, is that, our team our family support team was started 4 years after Dave's one event. It took that long to get it up and running. And every year it changes. Every year the peer support team changes. So what you guys, what we're all wanting to do now in retirement, it may take a while, but it's worth it, because if you really can help one person, and you won't be just helping one person, it's all worth it. So is there anybody on here that is a family member, or are you all officers besides Lisa? Or retired officers? That's Kathy and Shahidra. Well, you were family members too.
We're not retired.
Well, what I meant is the department, on the
Yeah,
department.
no, I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Lisa the only one that's a police wife that's on this thing, where the Zoom conference right now?
Yep.
I can't see all of you, so I don't know who all's on here.
I think so, Laura.
Okay. So what are some of your thoughts, or what are some of your comments, or do you think family's important? Can you see why we kind of experienced some of the same things you all did?
I think it's extremely important. Going back to the secondary trauma, the thing is with the officers, they become very hypervigilant throughout their career. And that hypervigilance does not end with just the officer or the agent. It also extends to the spouse and the children. So I think it's very important. And there's just so many cycles that your husband goes through, or your wife who's in law enforcement, that they go through, that it affects the whole household.
Brittany,
Yeah.
tell them about that.
Go ahead.
Well, our oldest daughter, I had some threats that were out against me, and had been for a while. I have a tendency of making some people angry, which I guess it worked well. But these were obviously not good people. They were bad guys, and there were some threats that came through towards us. And I think whenever Lisa had talked to the girls, our two daughters, just telling them to be very cautious, be aware of your surroundings, look who's around, just be aware of the people around you. Obviously that cued, and how old was she then?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, grade school.
Yeah, she was in elementary school, and kids are not stupid. They pick up on stuff like that. And she obviously picked up on the urgency in Lisa's voice. And me, I'm quiet. I don't say much, until I need to. But anyway, our oldest daughter, she's 31 years old, and she still suffers from anxiety issues because of that.
Because really, when I mentioned that, that when I ask other people, do you ever think about that? Like, if someone breaks in your house, where will you be? What will you do? You're always looking over your shoulder. And none of my friends that were in law enforcement had never thought about those things.
Yeah.
We take, after you guys have been in your career for so long, and those things that, it took me many years. I used to tell everybody that Dave was a police officer, and he'd say, Lori, because he would just say he worked for the city or whatever he would say. And it finally took me a while to like, I wouldn't do that. But, you become more anxious, because you're living in a different world than most of your friends. You're in the same world, but you're more anxious and you're more worried because you know more, and we don't know everything about what our officers did, but you're brought to that fruition. And when you have kids, like we had some of our, the person that helped me develop the family support team, when her husband's shooting happened, she was just pregnant at the time. So they had no reason to tell their kids that he was involved. But then you fast forward to like 2 years ago, and, you know, now everything that's brought up, like anything that you were on the news for, they'll bring it up again. So now that her kids are older, it's been in the news. Like if he's involved in something else, they go to the backstory where Officer so-and-so was involved in this in 2005. And then your kids are going, what? You never told me you were involved in that. So now it's not just, I mean, when we go on a call out, when I went with the families, if their officer was called out, like say he was involved in a shooting or something, and I was there for the family, now you have to worry about, oh my gosh, on Facebook, sometimes they know about it. Someone else knows about it before you know about it with your officer. It's on the news media. Now we have body cams. I don't know if you guys wore body cams. The feds don't. And like with Dave on the Joint Drug Task Force, they didn't, but a lot of the other officers had to. So then you worry about that. And you have to go through all these things now that 10 years ago, a lot of them didn't have to worry about. But so.
Whole new world.
So does anybody have any questions or
Whole new world.
thoughts or experiences in their own life that they want to share that with family, or how maybe you didn't realize till later how it affected the family? And I think sometimes by not telling us things, it makes it worse for me. For me, it does, because I'm the one that wants to know everything. But some wives or families don't want to know, you know, and they'll tell you, I don't want to know, and I don't really want to come in. I know he's okay, and I don't want to do that. So I guess you have to know what your relationship's like. But I'm, you know, Todd Dave's a lot like you. He's quiet until he has something to say, and then he says it. But I want to know. I'm more of an extrovert, and I want to know everything. So, I mean, maybe there is some things that he did or encountered that I really don't want to know, but I know there's a lot more he could have told me in his career that wouldn't make me feel like he was just closing down, shutting down.
Exactly. When they close down and shut off, you feel like you're being pushed away. It comes across as feeling very unloving. You're not part of their world anymore. And that's, as wives, we need to feel like we're part of their world.
Yep.
So when they close off and shut off that way, we feel that separation. And that's part of the anxiety and the fear, is that we're just being pushed away, and that they don't care or love us anymore. But also, we don't know how to be understanding and help and realize, you know, if they come home angry all the time, you don't know why, and you don't know how to help. So I think being open and talking about it does help.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
And that's why I think it's so important, feedback the last 3 years at least, that programs include spouses, family members, age appropriate with children, usually 18 or older, of why mom or dad looks this way, behaves this way, and what we talked about last time, going through the phases of work. You start your career all the way through the end of retirement, and what it looks like for the officer. Because once the family member can tap into that, there's more of an understanding where they go, oh, okay, that's why I see that now. I see why they're coming home a little bit on edge. I understand that if they've had a really bad day, it's not that they don't want to share it with me. It's that it was a bad situation and they don't want to share the details. So if you have an open communication right up front, because you have the understanding, the basis for the understanding, where you can say, either you're seeing they're having a bad day and you can say, can I help with anything? Always asking open-ended questions.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and really the number one thing that creates, I'll call it division, anger, resentment, whatever you want to term it, is I don't want to be fixed. If I'm going to share my day with you, it's because I want to bring you into the world where I still have control. I can't give you control as a spouse. I have to have the control. You need to understand that. But just listen. Don't try to fix me, because once you get into that, because it's natural. I mean, if my son comes to me and crying or whatever, I want to jump in right now and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I even have to take a step back. He's a teenager now. I have to take a step back and realize, oh, he's just wanting me to listen. It is exactly the same way with, officers and spouses. I mean, my husband, God bless him, he's in healthcare. Fixer. So we got me, fixer, him, fixer. It did not always work. I'm like, I'm just letting you know how this was. I don't want you to try to fix it. I just need to talk.
And if during everyone's career, especially in a law enforcement field, the family was brought into some type of training themselves about these are things to expect. These are things to look for. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean, they're having an affair. It doesn't mean this. It just means, maybe, and maybe instead of saying, I didn't do anything today, well, I mean, we're smart enough to know you did something for 8 hours, that, oh, I arrested some people. I did this, I did that. But, you don't have to, the stuff you don't want to talk about. It's not that we have to know every detail. It's just like, it's normal. If you love somebody, you want to know about their day. And so many people just, especially later on in their career, they just don't talk about it because there's a lot of yucky things you don't want to talk about. But if you just gave enough information that we still felt like part of the family or part of the team, that would help too. But
Well, I think you made a point right there, Lori, whenever you said that, you said something about being normal. I think in law enforcement, after you've been in it for years and you deal with the garbage of society, that's normal to us. And that's when we get home, it's like, nothing happened. It's just normal. It's just the same stuff. I really think that's what a lot of guys in law enforcement go through. It's like, I didn't kill anybody today.
So I didn't do anything, right?
You get complacent with the normal, don't you, Todd?
Very much so. Very much so, Steve. And you do. You get very you get very complacent.
Very complacent with what is normal to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And it is normal to us.
Right. And, and I didn't even talk about the stuff that I've probably never hardly, shared with Dave either, that, how many times people say negative things about law enforcement, whether they know we're a wife or not. And sometimes they do, and it doesn't matter, because when they see that somebody, shot somebody, or they saw that they did this or they did that, and they complain and bitch about them, those things affect us too, because we either don't say anything to them and get higher blood pressure than we already have, or we blow a gasket, so it's all those things, and so I think it's good for people to know too that they're not alone. This is really widespread, and this is what most of us experience, but no one ever talks to us about it.
Yeah.
share, or we don't share it so much. So,
And I think the older you get too, you become a lot more, well, I know since I've retired, at least I've been told this, that I have, my temper's not so bad. Whereas before, even on the job, you know, if we were out on an operation or something like that and somebody wanted to get stupid, I'd fight at the drop of a hat. I used to, and anybody. And now I'm like, whatever. I'm just, and you do, because whenever you get older, you become a little bit, hopefully a little more wiser. But I think when you separate from that, and when you retire and step away from all of that garbage that you deal with on a daily basis, it's like, wow, I feel like I'm part of human now. So, but when you're in it, that stress level's higher. Like you said, your blood pressure is higher, and you do. I mean, even some of the guys you work with, I know there were guys on my own team, and there was only 150 of us nationwide out of 3,000 people, and you're going through that selection process, and then but you bunk together, you sleep together, you eat together, you fight together, you shoot together. I mean, and then it's almost to the point where you're fighting even with your own brother sometimes. So when it gets to that point, then you know it's time to, okay, maybe I need to retire.
and I mean, I think, go
Once
ahead.
Once you retire, you get this feeling of looking through the eyes as a citizen again, not so much as a police officer.
Yes.
And you learn to become a little more tolerant than you used to be. At least that was my experience.
Yeah, I would agree, Steve.
Little less cynical.
A little less
I
cynical.
don't know. I'm still a little cynical, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that cynical's changed at all yet,
No.
Dave.
My
Nope.
wife says I need to shut my mouth more often.
I think that's harder to do when we get older too, because that filter kind of goes away too.
Yeah, it does.
Whoa.
Filter.
I still
faith-
have that police mentality. I just don't exercise it quite as often.
Yeah, understood.
I guess becoming a chaplain, I've learned to be a better listener than a talker, you know.
That's a good thing to be, as a good listener, for sure.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So that's really what I wanted to say tonight, but I just really wanted everybody's, feedback. And I think that, it's exciting to think of what hopefully we can do even to help others, because I don't want somebody out there that feels like whether they had to retire. We've had several in our department that some of them had to get off because of an injury that they couldn't stay on the department, or for PTSI or whatever, and they're so cynical, and they don't want to, they think their life is over, their career's over. And so how we can, you can bridge the gap to getting them back into having significance in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear from other people that have retired and had a good career or a bad career or whatever, and came out of it pretty good, how they can survive too.
I think the thing that bothers me the most now being retired and looking back, one is not involving the family more. That caused an issue and created an issue. I don't see it changing for a long time, because there's what would you call it? Not really a mystique, but there's, it's like that silent brotherhood. It's like, we don't talk about that. And with one of the guys that I went through selection process with, team basic training with, and then a few years later we went through sniper school together. And then here about 7 months ago, he and his wife were fighting, got drunk, walked outside with a pistol, shot and killed himself right in front of his wife and his kids. And it's swept under the rug. Nobody to this day on my team, my old team, talks about it. And that angers me because it's a problem and it's not addressed, and it needs to be addressed.
Nobody wants to admit they're the chink in the armor.
That's exactly right, Dave. That's exactly right. And there are some things that I get very passionate about, and y'all could probably tell whenever my voice starts to go up, I get very passionate about that because it angers me, because I know there's a problem. I saw it, I lived it, and I look back now and I'm thinking, man, you guys are blind. You not see this, what's right in front of you right now. And they won't see it. They won't see it until after they retire.
And what we talked about earlier is, I fear, and I think you all do, is, now that a lot of people are getting off earlier in their career and they thought they'd be there forever to a certain age or whatever. And now what else am I going to do? And they're not happy because of the way they're being treated. And just, we have people dropping like flies on our department. People that were going to work maybe 5 more years or longer, and they're just walking in and giving their 2 weeks notice, or they're putting in for, we have a drop program here. Mm-hmm. So they've never seen it like, and we live in Indiana. We don't live in, New York and Chicago and those places. So I can't even imagine how some of them are still able to function. But, a lot of times they don't know any other skill. That's another thing. If they got on early in their career and they didn't have another skill, they feel like they can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. If they want to get off or they can't afford it because they're in debt out the wazoo, they have to still work. And so, trying to find things that, what other careers are out there? What other things can you do, and financially?
Well, I'll say this on the federal level too. You're forced out at the age of 57. You can go after 20 years service at age 50, or 25 years at any age, and then 20 years at age 50. But at age 57, they force you out. They give you that slip and say, there's the door, go.
Mandatory.
Do what, Steve?
It's mandatory.
Yeah, it is. It's mandatory. You don't. Now, occasionally you'll see a guy that will get a waiver. He'll get an extension for 1 year, but it's always in a 1-year increments. I've seen one guy get 2 1-year increments, and that was it. But still, 99.9% of the guys in federal law enforcement, you're leaving by age 57. 57 years old is really kind of young.
Yes.
Especially if you don't want, if you don't want to leave and you don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, and I left at age 52, and I'm just turned 56 now. But at 52, I'm thinking, well, but I left there, and then I went back into the training section. I ran a police academy and overall the and the combatives programs, and then did that, and I'm like, But then now I'm back in that too. So now I'm back in the whole training aspect of it. But that's all I know from age 21 till now. That's all I know. I don't know anything else. I know how to shoot. I know how to fight.
That may be important in the days. Hey, Todd, that may become very important in the days ahead. So it's a good thing.
Well, let me know. I like to shoot and I like to fight still.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if someone wants to have like a different career, when retire early, it's like, we're not even setting them up for success of, what else?
You're not.
Doing.
And I'm sure Sam would probably tell you this, and Steve the same thing, and especially in the federal level, when guys get to that age and they're getting close to that retirement, either mandatory or that's their own decision, there's guys worrying, and there's guys scared to death, literally scared to death, because they're like, what am I going to do? And you have to I've learned that you really you kind of have to reinvent yourself in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, you've got to go, and just like what we're covering right here, you've got to include the family. The family has got to be involved. Otherwise, you're doing the same thing you were doing for all those years. And there's that separation again.
You know, like how some universities, because I've taught at the university too, but you know how they have, you know, sometimes they have classes or free classes for vets when they get out, sometimes or whatever. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if we could work with universities, if, you know, for people in law enforcement, that when they got out, if they wanted to do anything like that, that maybe we could support them, and even at the community college level or whatever, to give them a jump start in something else. Like, what other things are you interested in doing? But to give people a purpose, basically. But
I think it's a good idea. Community colleges, I know in the state of Texas, that have
or
there are academies there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of instructors, or a lot of positions that they could come in and fill as a retiree, to go back and teach the things that they did for all those years.
so
I think the challenge with that is, after they've been in law enforcement for 20 plus years, they lived and breathed their career. Their job was their family. And they stopped doing all the things that they may have enjoyed doing before, all the hobbies. Todd used to love to do woodwork and stuff, met in his 20s. And he had some hobbies that he enjoyed, but over time, he stopped doing any hobbies whatsoever. And he just lived and breathed his job, and he was gone all the time. And when he was home, he was too tired to do anything. So their whole identity becomes their career, and they forget some of the things that they may have enjoyed prior to that whole job taking over their life.
that's interesting that you said it became their family.
Yes, it became their family, which is part of the anger part that we as spouse feel. But I think this is where, in a positive way, a spouse can help encourage their law enforcement officer who is retiring, by reminding them some of the things that they're good at, and encouraging them that life does not stop. And these are the things that you've always loved. These are the things that you're good at. You just have to think about all of the possibilities. It's a big world out there, and there's so many things that you can do. And that is the part that I think is important, is just knowing how to encourage them to see past their job ending in law enforcement.
Yep.
Well, I know Kathy and Shahid are at 5, so I don't know if we can keep going the discussion, or we need to stop. But you know,
did a great job, Lori. Very, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all the speakers and what you guys have talked about and shared. I really appreciate it.
So